thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, everyone online, for joining us as well. This is one of a series of interactions that the Trinity Centre for Literary and Cultural Translation has with the Taipei representative office in Dublin. And we always love working with Pierre and his colleagues because they always come up with such brilliant ideas. And today we're celebrating the first translation of, please correct me if I'm wrong, the first translation of Dubliners into the Taiwanese language, not Mandarin. So Mandarin is one language which exists in Taiwan and one of many languages. Taiwanese is another language, and it's one that we, I think, don't hear very often in Dublin. So it's especially special, this event today. So we're delighted to be able to welcome you here to celebrate the launch of the translation. And we also have the translator here. So thank you very much for joining us. Could I start by asking you how you or why you started to translate James Joyce?
Okay. Actually, there is an action for promoting Taiwanese in Taiwan, and I translate English books into Mandarin before, but a couple of years ago, one of my friends who is promoting Taiwanese in Taiwan, he invited me to try to get a English literature work, and try to translate it to Taiwanese. Okay, then I think of Dubliners because one of the reasons is it is a really famous work in the world, a first-class work. Okay, and the second is that it's a rather short work for me, for everybody. It's short. It's smaller than Finnegan Wake. Okay, then Ulysses. Okay, smaller, and that's proper for me because this is my first time to translate work into Taiwanese. I don't want the work to volume to a big volume.
Yeah.
So okay, I chose it. And there is another reason I choose the book. Many years ago, when I went to the literature competition in my campus, when I was a graduate student, okay, then I went to the translation competition, and they give some paragraphs from Dublin from the test. That was my first time to match the book, match James Joyce. Okay, my first time. But then I didn't know how great he was. I didn't know. I had no idea then, and I didn't know how the great book it is. Oh, okay. Then I won the competition and I got second prize.
Oh, excellent.
I didn't know why. I got second prize and got some money for the
prize
award.
Okay, but for many years I hadn't think of the book until my friend asked me to find out work to translation.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And so those who are listening very closely to my introduction will notice that I didn't say your name because I wanted you to pronounce your name for me because I'm afraid to say it wrong.
My name in Mandarin or in Taiwanese?
Well, both, please.
Both, okay. In Mandarin, Liu. My last name Liu. Okay, Lâu Îng-sîng. Okay, this in Mandarin way, and in Taiwanese way, Lâu Îng-sîng.
So we can see immediately that the languages sound quite different.
Quite different. No?
And so when you were translating into Taiwanese, did you also look at existing translations into Mandarin?
有没有看华语的翻译？当你在翻译
Of
成
course
台
I
语
did. Actually, I have 2 Mandarin translation for my reference. Okay, because 应该怎么说？我们翻译的人会去参考前人的成果。
It's customary for translators to refer to other rendered texts.
而且当我们参考华语译本的时候，然后再看原文，会发现说，华语译本没有那么好。
Okay. So when we refer to the Mandarin translations and then we go back to the source text, we sometimes realize, Mandarin translation isn't that good.
Not good enough. Okay. There are some little mistakes in Mandarin translation.
Yeah. And so I suppose that when you notice these kinds of problems, you feel I can solve these problems.
Yes.
And
somehow.
And are there any of these problems which you remember, like especially maybe not big problems, but especially problems that you spent a long time fixing?
Okay. 最主要的困难 could you translate for me?
The whole thing. Okay, I'm going to speak on behalf of him. So the main challenges arising from translating into Taiwanese is that the Taiwanese language was without orthography for a long time. And 100-some years ago, Western missionaries they developed a romanization system for Taiwanese. And that became the writing system of Taiwanese. More recently, the Ministry of Education also promulgated a standardized Taiwanese script using Han characters. So that would be the Mandarin characters. And this has made writing Taiwanese no longer an arduous task. That being said, lots of Taiwanese people are unfamiliar with the Taiwanese language. They mistakenly transfer the syntax of Mandarin into Taiwanese, thinking that the only difference between these two languages is the pronunciation. But when we translate English text into Taiwanese, it's not enough to simply render English into Taiwanese. One has to take care to not let Mandarin slip through there. And also the avoidance of this Mandarin Taiwanese is the first and foremost challenge. And after that, the challenge lies in making the most of features in the thinking in Taiwanese, taking the Taiwanese translation onto a higher level, let's say a deeper level than the Mandarin translations.
Is that answer your question?
It does, thank you. Amazing that you already predicted what I would ask.
I think many people would think of the question.
And so when you say that you want to go deeper into the translation, could you
give an example?
Yeah. Oh.
He came prepared.
We honestly didn't share notes.
I did prepare the example, but it's hard to translate. Okay. So let me try to express the difficulty in the Mandarin first. Okay. 英文里面常常有一种句型哈的有一种句型，就形容词加一个名词。 譬如说I got a sentence in from two sisters, okay, and the sentence his little beady black eyes, okay. Do you remember this sentence? His little beady black eyes, okay. The priest 那个神父的，okay. And so you know the syntax is couple of 形容词怎么说？形容好，几个形容词加上一个名词，比如说加上一个好，最后是个眼睛。好，那如果是华语的翻译，就是他那双小小的、晶亮的黑眼睛。好，那么如果说我们这个台语翻译也照着这个华语的方式来翻的话，那变成说会变成说，伊迄双细粒的个金信息的白人，好，那 that's a bad Taiwanese, that's bad, not good.
So a common structure, a phrasal structure in English would be an adjective or adjectives followed by a person or an object. Okay, so in Mandarin translation, there's usually a fixed pattern that can be readily applied to the translation. But this fixed pattern doesn't necessarily apply in Taiwanese. So the example given is taken from Two Sisters, the story Two Sisters, in which the phrase his little beady black eyes. So the adjectives followed by a noun. And that is easily translated into Mandarin as 他 for his, 那细小 little, 晶亮 beady 的黑 black 眼珠 eyes. So the basic structure in the Mandarin translation is 他那双. So that's the kind of like the subject, followed by a few adjectives, and then followed by the object, 眼睛, the eyes. Okay, but if one were to apply this structure directly into Taiwanese, the rendered text would be what he just said, the Taiwanese version. Okay, this would be considered Mandarin Taiwanese. That would be deemed not a good translation. Okay, not authentic.
Okay. 所以为了避免这种华语式的台语避免这种 Mandarin Taiwanese，那我们可以改用一种方式，就是把那个物体就是人或物要形容的那个 object 先摆在前面，然后后面再加上 predicate。OK， 是我们所以像这样改的话呢，就可以用那个我们的那个 subject 变成说一双眼睛他那双黑眼珠作为一个 subject， 那后面就是一些 predicate， 比如说就改成说一双眼睛细细粒吧金星星 ，the predicate 移到后面去。Okay.
So to avoid the type of Mandarin Taiwanese we spoke of, the Mandarin structure of adjectives plus an object, that is changed into object first plus predicate complement for Taiwanese. Now, what does that mean? In other words, his black eyes becomes the subject. It appears first. And the rest of the object the adjectives become a predicate complement that follows the subject and is used to describe and expand on said subject. So the structure that is more authentically Taiwanese would appear thus. I'm not going to read the Taiwanese, I'm going to translate it directly into English so you get a feel of the word order. So it becomes his black eyes, little beady. And that would be authentically. Does that make sense?
Okay. 这是一个基本的句型变化的方式，然后它就可以用在很多地方有一些变化用在别的地方。
So that example is a basic structural change when rendering text from English to Taiwanese, and it can be applied to other contexts.
So is there enough? Just one example?
Well, I imagine you have more.
Okay, do you need another one or just let me go? 对，因为要解释这些例子也其实
Give us another example. Because I speak Mandarin. You know. So what you say is very difficult for me even.
Oh, really? Oh.
Because I translate the Mandarin into so just you say I use Mandarin lines. So give us another example.
Another example and more complicated. Okay,
Perfect.
Two sisters. Okay, and there's a sentence. To find him. Okay, the him is the priest. To find him nearly smothered in his greatcoat. Okay, like me. Okay. Okay. To find him nearly smothered in his greatcoat. Okay. 那华语对这个句子会说，他被一件很大的外套包得紧紧的，好，类似这样子。好，那怎么说？就说，那如果说以这种华式的台语来翻的话，会变成紧啊就短呀油啊。好，那 OK， 这不是一个很好的翻译。
So because you asked for it, here it is, another example. It is from two sisters. To find him nearly smothered in his greatcoat. This is a more complex sentence because it deals with two main things. It's the person, we're first talking about the clothing, and then the person wearing the clothing. So this needs to be separately dealt with in Taiwanese. Now, a Mandarin translation would have the structure of basically he is being smothered in a greatcoat. So 他被, there's the word 被 to denote a passive voice. But actually the use of the word 被 in Mandarin on its own is redundant because the passive voice in Mandarin is dealt implicitly inside the structure. So there's no need for a word to appear to denote it. Okay, but if we were to do that, to use that type of structure into a Taiwanese version, that would also appear redundant and it wouldn't make enough sense. So he's going to explain how to do it.
这一句的华语的翻译会是说，他被一件很大的外套紧紧包裹着。Okay, this is the Mandarin translation. 他被一件很大的外套紧紧包裹着。So if I follow this Mandarin translation, I would be 以后一领就大领的袖仔包甲安冻冻。就是 directly translated from Mandarin translation. Okay, but it's not good. Okay.
So to use the exact same structure of employing a word to denote a passive voice in Mandarin is to employ the word 被. And there's an equivalent in Taiwanese, it's 有. But using both those words would not be authentically Taiwanese.
You know, the explanation is actually difficult even in Mandarin. Okay, I mean, so when I try to explain this translation problem to Mandarin listener, 他们也不见得觉得很容易懂。
It's hard to comprehend even for Mandarin speakers.
Okay, so 那我后来用了比较适合台语的方式，就变成说一几领袖啊。然后 OK， 几领袖啊，那就是主词嘛，那后面大书就是把 predicate 放在后面，以几领袖啊大书，然后后面把个安动动，把 predicate 移到后面，那这是比较有台语味道的一种句子。
So to give a more Taiwanese flair to this sentence, the sentence will not only follow the object plus predicate complement, this format. It would also omit the use of any passive voice denotations. And the word then, therefore, the sentence will become he and then coat. So his coat, basically, great, and then be smothered. So you're changing the order, and that would appear more authentic in Taiwanese.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's a lot of information for me. I don't know anything about Taiwanese language, so it's really fascinating because I knew that the two languages exist together in Taiwan, but I didn't know about translation between them because my understanding was that people. Is it true that everybody in Taiwan speaks Mandarin, but only half of the people speak Taiwanese?
Yes, everybody can speak Mandarin in Taiwan, but just few, 也不算 few people, 没那么少，就是
Perhaps slightly more than few.
more than few, okay, more than few can speak in Taiwanese fluently.
Oh, okay.
I am not the most fluently Taiwanese speaker in Taiwan. I am not, okay, but I am just an okay speaker. Okay. But I try to translation because people who are more fluently in Mandarin than me don't do translation.
Oh, okay.
They don't do this.
I think you're being very modest. And so why, what is your motivation for translating the text into Taiwanese, not into Mandarin?
Okay, the motivation.
Yeah.
Okay, 因为台语在台湾是个濒危的语言，所以我们想要就好像爱尔兰语在爱尔兰。
And the main motivation is that I feel that Taiwanese is an endangered language in Taiwan, much like Irish is in Ireland, where there's the incentive to promote it.
That's a good reason. And are there a lot of translators now working into Taiwanese specifically?
有没有很多台语翻译者？
No.
Oh.
This is just the beginning. There are just 就有几本书已经翻成台语，只有几本而已。
It's only a handful of books that's translated into Taiwanese.
Not much, not much. And there are some 这种运动者吧，推广台语的运动者，在推广台语，然后他们认为说，推广台语的一个重要的一个路子，就是要多翻译国外的文学著作。
So they are proponents, promoters of the Taiwanese language, and they propose that the most effective way of promoting Taiwanese is to actually translate foreign texts into Taiwanese.
所以有些人翻译日本的文学，有些人翻译英美的文学，这样也有法国的文学。
And therefore, there are a few Japanese translated into Taiwanese or French, English from America, any other English-speaking regions.
I suppose this way, if the texts are already in Taiwanese, then new readers can read the texts in Taiwanese.
No.
I mean, if you translate, then it's available for them.
Yes, that's available, but I don't think many people could read it because even you can listen and speak Taiwanese, 你也可能不会读，因为要读这个语言，因为这是最近才有的一个文字系统。
So there is some sort of disconnect between the different skill levels. So even if one in Taiwan understands in terms of listening and speaking Taiwanese, the actual writing may be difficult because this is fairly new, as in using the Han characters to describe Taiwanese. That's a relatively new thing, and not a lot of people are skilled at that.
And when did that start to happen?
那个汉字台语汉字是什么时候开始的？
100多年前就开始，但是呢，因为个人有个人的发展不同的学者有不同的发展，那么直到2006年262006或07年，教育部才颁定了一个统一的文字系统。
So the Romanization of Taiwanese started about 100 years ago by the Western missionaries, but there were different systems, and it was using a phonetic way of describing Taiwanese. So it didn't really catch on within the Taiwanese population. And it wasn't until about 2006, 2007 that the Ministry of Education promulgated this characters using the script of Han Chinese to describe Taiwanese. So it's fairly new.
I noticed actually when Pierre sent me the text that I'm going to ask you to read in a minute, most of the characters are Han characters, but some of them are not. So some like there's an E with a circumflex, and I actually sent a message back to Pierre saying, do you think something has gone strange with the encoding? And he said, no, this is how it's written. So is it because those words don't have Han characters?
好难解释啊，就是说，一开始100多年前，传教士在为台语发展书写系统的时候，一开始用的都是罗马拼音罗马拼音。那慢慢有人觉得说，罗马拼音不够，也要找出汉字来那只是说台语里头还有一些地方不容易找到汉字，这样。
So when we started with Romanization, that was 100 years ago, it was deemed insufficient to fully describe Taiwanese, and perhaps out of habit, there was still a need for the Han characters to be injected. But there are still sounds in the Taiwanese language that cannot be denoted with a Han character. And that's why you see now a mixture of using Han characters and Romanization.
那在我们想要推广台语的人来说尽量多用汉字来推广，会比较让大家容易接受。那如果通通都用那种罗马拼音，大家不好读。
这是一种习惯问题。
对对。
And because to appeal to Taiwanese who brought up with, learning Mandarin using Han characters, it is believed that to be more effective in promoting Taiwanese language, you need to start using Han characters more, because the Romanization system it's too alien for the local Taiwanese.
Well, I suppose it would be quite hard to read as well if it was everything Roman letters, because there are so many sounds which are homophones, like the same sound but a different word, I imagine.
同音字，他说因为中文有很多，就台语有很多同音字，所以如果只是单纯用罗马拼音的话，你很难去知道那什么意思。
单纯只看罗马拼音的话，会读的比较慢。
就是有那个语调的问题就是像四声
对，
有这个问题嘛，
对不
对？So it is true that pure Romanization, to use pure Romanization to describe Taiwanese and to read it would be inefficient. It would take very long to understand what it means. And also there's the complexity with the tones.
Yeah.
So Mandarin has the 4 tones and Taiwanese has 8 tones. So that gets very complicated if it's just strictly through a Romanization system.
And I'm interested in, so also, as you know, Cantonese has many sounds that don't, and words that don't exist in Mandarin. And then over the years, they've invented characters for those sounds. And I would like to know, is a similar thing happening in Taiwan to invent characters which represent Taiwanese words that don't have Mandarin characters?
像广东话没有办法完完全全用汉字来表述，所以广东话有自己单独的文字。那台语有没有字，就是只有台语有这个字。 这有没有
就是
发明？
官方颁定的台语字，颁定的那种比如说3000个、5000个通用的台语汉字，其实不难从你的，因为我们以前都会学华语嘛，那其实不难从华语去猜它的汉字的意思，就不会花太久的时间。
那些都是本身就是汉字吗？还是说是特别为台语人？
只有少数的字是格外造的。
So mostly the officially published list of Taiwanese characters. So, you know, the common 3,000 words in Taiwanese, 5,000 words in Taiwanese, they are mostly based on Mandarin characters, and only very limited numbers are new inventions.
Okay. It always makes people laugh when they've only learnt European languages. If you say, oh, it's just 2,000 characters. So could we listen to you reading some of the text in Taiwanese, please?
Sure. And now the first paragraph is from Evelyn. Okay. This is when Evelyn is think of his past. He do the homework every day. She was tired. Okay. 刷来，伊就爱洗刷，总去到市场，伊一家补习皮包平条条，双手后翘，咧甲人烧下烧客，到七晚变晚，才有通大包细包食用的赶倒转来。要甲规家伙仔靠做堆，伊就爱煮细忙忙，逐项拍拼。两个细汉囡仔放互伊，伊就爱顾因复习间去学校，是豆是红食3顿。工课介艰苦，日子生本歹过。毋过，当伊咧要来脱身啊，伊煞感觉即款生活也毋是无甲一个好呢。Could you understand my?
Did I? Yeah, because I have a cheat sheet.
That helps.
But I could, yeah.
Oh, I'll read it in English. Not in an Irish accent.
In a Dublin accent.
Definitely not. So it's Evelyn. Then she had to rush out as quickly as she could and do her marketing. Holding back her black leather purse tightly in her hand, she elbowed her way through the crowds, and returning home late under her load of provisions, she had hard work to keep the house together, and to see that the 2 young children who had been left to her charge went to school regularly and got their meals regularly. It was hard work, a hard life, but now that she was about to leave it, she did not find it wholly an undesirable life.
May I say something why I choose this paragraph?
Please.
Okay. Evelyn is a teenager girl. His mother is passed away. Okay. She has nephew to take care of. She has his father. Okay, so 上有老下有小. But she is a teenager, but she has to do everything in the house every day. Okay, but they don't have many money. Okay, so 这一段让我觉得，这就是传统女性不得不担任妈妈的工作那么的辛苦，然后这个 Joyce 能够写到这个，我觉得很不容易。
So the reason I picked this segment to read was this Evelyn, this character really spoke to me as a teenager. She had to look after her elderly father and also the younger nephews in her charge. And she had to do it even though she was herself a child. And I felt that really spoke to me about the traditional role of women. And I found it fascinating that Joyce wrote about it.
This raises a question for me about how well Taiwanese people understand the relationship between Ireland and the rest of Europe.
I don't think many people know that. 对吧？
Mm. Yeah.
So when you say Dublin in Taiwan, do people know where this is?
I don't think so. I'm not. I don't mean to be impolite. 爱尔兰可能不是台湾人很想要留学的一个地方，留学或来工作的地方。因为离我们蛮遥远的。我们比较熟悉的可能是美国、日本、德国英国这样。
So Ireland wouldn't be the first to come to mind when it comes to going abroad to study, to relocate, to migrate for the Taiwanese. So probably not.
Well, that's very honest reply. No. So, but does this create problems for you when you're translating? Because maybe Joyce was assuming that you would know things that the reader does not know.
Okay. When I translated the book, 我事实上也有请教别的爱尔兰文学的学者。
So I understand the issue you raised here, and indeed, I felt that was an issue, and therefore I refer to scholars in Taiwan that research largely on Joyce, on Ireland, Irish studies.
And for the reader, do you think it's easy for them to imagine the setting?
Not that easy. Not that easy. But for me, the most difficult, it's not the English writing. 它的英文写作并不难，但是它的里面的一些 meaning 可能不好去抓到。我特别想举的例子，比如说 a painful case, the title, for example, a painful case or the death, OK， 就是都是短短的，英文很简单，可是不见得好翻译。
So I find that with Joyce, he uses words sparingly at times, especially with the titles. So for example, a painful case or the dead, it's very short. So the English language itself, the language itself is easy to understand, but the meaning behind it can be complex and complicated. Therefore, that becomes a bit of a challenge when I'm translating it into Taiwanese.
我可以举个很短的例子比如说 a painful case, the title, a painful case. 我的原来的翻译是不幸事故，不幸事故。但是呢，有一个学者跟我讨论，他觉得这样不对。他说那个 painful is the painful for the 那个女主角叫做什么 cynical 太太 Mrs.
Cynical in the painful case,
who is the
Mrs.
woman in the painful case, Mrs. Cynical or
Mrs. S. Just call her Mrs. S.
OK， 他跟那学者跟我说，那个 painful 呢是对那个女主角 painful， 对那个男主角也是 painful， 对两个人都是 painful， 但是又是不同的 pain，different pain。所以我后来改了这个标题，原来是不幸事故，然后后来扣减低，这个比较好。
In Taiwan. Okay. So this is an example of revisions I had to make. So the title of A Painful Case, I originally translated as 不幸事故, which if you translate back directly into English would be like an unfortunate event. Okay.
Accident, something like that.
But when I consulted scholars, they said, no, you got it wrong. The painful here refers, it's pain for the female protagonist and also pain for the male protagonist, but it's different pain. If I thought about it and I thought, okay, I came up with a better translation, and that is 苦情记. Now this may mean nothing to you, but it's a very Taiwanese expression of unrequited love. It's kind of love, pain and love.
And I wish to add that 苦情记它表面上是看起来是 正面的，让人引起同情心的。可是他想要讲的那个故事一点都不是那样，他有一种反讽的感觉。
And I also want to add that using the title, the new title, 苦情记, may sound like you're doing a positive spin, like this is a story that's inviting you to empathize with the characters, but really enjoy this story. It's not. There's a sense of irony there.
English maybe we can translate painful love story.
Painful love story.
Right?
It's a story for not to love. For the main character in the story, right?
So you have an extract here. So if I read it in English first, would you read your translation of A Painful Case? Is that okay? Okay, so A Painful Case. He turned back the way he'd come, the rhythm of the engine pounding in his ears. He began to doubt the reality of what memory told him. He halted under a tree and allowed the rhythm to die away. He could not feel her near him in the darkness, nor her voice touch his ear. He waited for some minutes listening. He could hear nothing. The night was perfectly silent. He listened again, perfectly silent. He felt that he was alone.
It's my turn. Okay. 我回去拄才过来的方向，耳孔边眼镜弄弄下，一声来一声去。伊渐渐咧遐疑，这记忆内底的代志敢有影？伊来甲一张树仔骹停咧，等候眼镜的节奏走无去。伊无感觉黑暗中身边有什么可太太，耳孔嘛无伊的话声来回。伊伫遐甲听几啊分钟，无声无说。一暗暝点接到结，搁再甲听点接到结，伊感觉伊当高兴一下啊。
Thank you very much.
He felt that he was alone. It's a powerful but short sentence, just like she was tired. 我在翻译 "She was tired" 的时候，也花了一些心思。要说吗？She was tired from evening, okay, and the sentence is so short. 好，那就算是国中生也看得懂，对不对？好，那华语的翻译都是他累了，就3个字，他累了。好。那么where is it? Even I couldn't find it. Okay. In Mandarin translation, it's like 他累了, just 3 characters. Okay, it's short also, but when I think of the sentence, I try to add something, 语气.
So add a tone to it.
I try to sympathize with the girl. Okay, so 我这样翻呢，伊啊，人世间。
You heard the translation. I think 你要说明一下你那个句子有逗号的那个用法。
对对，I add a comma in the sentence. Yeah, she, comma. The where the comma is, I give a 叹一口气。
There's a sigh. The comma provides a pause for you to add in your sigh.
Yeah. She was tired so much, but the sentence is short because she's not so energetic to say, "Oh, I'm tired." No, not that. 她累到说不出这句话。
She's so tired that she can't even utter 3 letters.
Okay.
This is a really nice link to another question that I wanted to ask you, which is that so much of Joyce is to do with the sound of the language. It's a little like poetry because it's very, very oral in nature. And so I'm always interested when someone says that they've been translating Joyce. I always want to ask, did you have to read it out loud many times before you were happy?
Okay. Actually, I didn't do it every time, but I read it many times, and 一边念一边去想说它会是什么口气这样。
So I don't always do it, but I do try and read out Joyce out loud, and I'm paying attention to what kind of tone he's trying to convey here.
那尤其是它有些句子竟然这么短，我相信它一定是有一些用意的。
Particularly, I pay attention to the simple sentences, the very short ones, because I think there's a meaning there. There's a purpose why it's so short.
And I suppose that because Taiwanese is a language that's still finding its written form, it makes sense for it to be a very oral text, like one that you might imagine a reader reading aloud.
Yes, 我应该怎么说？我翻译出来的句子，我当然会在脑中把它念过好几遍，看顺不顺，还有口气对不对，情绪对不对。
那你会不会特别去说这个音感，就是这些音感啊？
像刚刚这个就是一个嘛，就是我想要有它的，我希望翻译出来有一个节奏，有一个很累的节奏。
Yes, indeed. So I do read out my own translations of it because I want to pay attention to see if I had successfully conveyed the tone, the kind of the idea behind the sentence. So like the example I gave earlier, the Taiwanese translation of "she was tired," I read it because I want to add in that tempo to convey the tiredness, the fatigue of Evelyn's life.
Actually, I visit with Mr. Yang to 那个什么爱尔兰文学馆 and where I know that there is a long tradition in Ireland that the storyteller 的那个传统 a long tradition of storyteller. So I wonder maybe Joyce joined the tradition. His story maybe something like storyteller 的那一种风格会不会有？
I think. Oh, sorry.
Get that. So I know, like Joyce, I wondered if he also came from this long tradition of storytelling that's very prevalent in Irish culture.
I think that's a good connection to make. Okay, we're running out of time rapidly. I wondered whether there are any questions from the audience, and including the people online.
Sarah, you must find it very difficult to translate Joyce's work into Taiwanese because many Irish people don't even understand that. Joyce, you have to read between the lines to understand what the end, and let's try and think what's in his head because he's a bit of a joker. He wants to puzzle you.
就说那翻译乔伊斯，我觉得特别困难，因为对爱尔兰人讲，乔伊斯已经不容易懂，因为乔伊斯的文学，他的读很多是言外之意。那你有没有感觉这是一个怎么去克服这个挑战？
言外之意，
我自己觉得
我也很难的，这个很难表达的出来。也说什么言外之意很难表达。首先我要抓到那个言外之意，我才能想到怎么表达。
你在翻译的时候有觉得你有特别去注意到这些？他文字这样写，可是他想要表达是别的意思，你有特别注意到这个？
有一个最明显的点就是呢，比如说他常常，比如说你看那个故事的标题，会以为说他是想讲什么正面的东西譬如说这个 two gallons 那 gallons 是正面的字那明明那个故事就是很糟糕的、很不堪的，所以我就要想办法去把那个正面的词里面的讽刺的意思把它找出来。我不能把正面的词故意把它翻成负面的，为了要让读者知道说这是个负面的故事，我就把它翻负面的，不行我必须把它翻成正面的词。所以像 two gallons我可以比较华语的翻译跟台语的翻译two gallons 华语翻译翻成有翻成护花使者。好，那 OK， 那但是我们发现说这个两个男主角并不只是在做护花的事情那所以我要重新思考 gallons 要怎么翻。那后来我找到一个比较正面的词，叫做好汉。好汉，那实际上这两个人根本就不是好汉。
I do take your point, and Joyce is a bit of a joker, and you do need to read between the lines. Now, of course, the first and foremost challenge is I need to understand what is being said between the lines, and that sometimes is difficult. And one thing I do come across, and particularly with Joyce's titles, how he chooses to name each of the stories, a lot of times I feel that the words he chooses are quite positive. They put things on a positive light. So for example, the story, The Two Gallants, I would think that gallant is quite a positive word. It's a positive connotation. But when you read the story, you realize that these two lads are anything but. But when translating into Taiwanese, I also have to think how to retain this level of irony, the sense of irony in the title. And therefore, I can't just outright call it a bad name, given what it deserves. And I consulted the Mandarin translation. So in Mandarin, they translated the two gallants into Hu Hua Shi Zhe, which means like they're the protectors of girls. Hua in this context, flower, to mean girls. But that's too flowery. That's, pardon the pun, that's too flowery because that's too positive. And you realize that's not at all what the story is saying. So in Taiwanese, I settled on a phrase, hao han, which on the surface is good man. But the simplicity of it would tell you that, there's something else going on there. And therefore, it retains the irony.
好汉这个词它有正面的意思，可是在中文的脉络里面，它有时候也来讲反话，在指一个不是好汉的人。
And particularly the phrase 好汉 in Mandarin even, on the surface, it's a positive thing to call someone 好汉, a good lad. But oftentimes it's used as a sarcastic way of describing someone who was no good.
That's a brilliant example. Thank you.
Question about your process. Like you said, this was your first translation into Taiwanese, right?
Right.
And you said you're not the most fluent speaker, and I think you speak in Mandarin, right? You speak in Mandarin. Like, do you first translate it into Mandarin and then into Taiwanese, or you go directly from English into Taiwanese?
Okay. At the beginning, I had to first translate to Mandarin and second to Taiwanese. But later and later, I maybe don't need to do that.
That's a good question.
Very good question. For most of Taiwanese, like me, translate into Mandarin. Then, because we are much more familiar Mandarin than so. I was early one, but Taiwanese for me is second. And now we can use maybe if I like to show my Taiwanese identity, I speak Taiwanese. But most of the time I speak Mandarin.
I think most people who translate into Irish
Mm.
probably could relate to this situation. There's not very many people who translate from, for example, Mandarin into Irish directly. Are there any other questions from the audience? Please.
Maybe two questions. First one is, because you said this book by Dubliners, it's not actually so well known among Taiwanese people.
Mhm.
But so what do you wish to do with this book? Is it only targeting the academics, or you want more and more Taiwanese speakers to try to read more in Taiwanese? And the second question is, what's your next project in Taiwanese translation?
It's my question.
第一个问题，他是不是问说这本书对台湾人也不是那么熟悉的书？
就是你的用语，因为你既然说台湾人其实不太熟悉都柏林人，那么你翻成台语，你的对都是你想要达到什么目的？就是你的这个标靶读者是谁？
其实一开始我没有想到这个是读者市场的问题，一开始没有。那而且我一开始我也觉得这个书这么冷门，大概没有什么人会注意我。那但是呢，我来爱尔兰之前，这本书呢，是有在网络上发消息说有兴趣买的人可以跟我买，还有100多人来跟我买，然后让我才知道说，原来有这么多人知道 Dubliners。我太小看人家了呀。
So in the beginning, when I was translating the Dubliners, I was under the impression that Taiwanese didn't know about this book, and I wasn't really considering who my target readers were. But when I finished the translation, I was about to come to Ireland, and I put it up. I announced that, well, here's the book here. Anyone interested in purchasing a copy, please get in touch. And to my surprise, over 100 people got in touch to buy the book. And then I have to say, I misunderstood the popularity of Dubliners.
Second question.
对，这是你下一个作品是什么？
下一个作品我下一个作品可能有人会以为说是不是要挑战那个 Joyce 的更深的作品可能没有我没有这么厉害。那可能会先选一个比较 popular 的作品，譬如说福尔摩斯，譬如说什么格利佛游记
，Gulliver Travels。
好像这一类比较 popular 的书这样。
So for my next project, you might be under the impression that I'm going to go with something more complicated from Joyce, but that's not the case. I'm going to pick something a bit more popular for the readers, so things like Sherlock Holmes maybe, or Gulliver's Travels.
那目前台湾卖的最好的翻译成台语的文学作品是《小王子》，因为它是 most popular。
So at the moment, the best-selling Taiwanese translation is The Little Prince, because that's a very popular book.
So you like The Little Prince?
I like to explain why the Dubliners is popular in Taiwan. Because there is another famous Taiwanese modern writer who write Taipei people.
With characters. 就他旧的翻译是 Taipei characters.
Yeah, okay.
台北人。
It's the same structure of Dublin. 15 short story about very citizen and the same technique even. So it's how can I say, just copy but try to describe the Taipei's life, but very successful. So that's why Taiwanese people know better Dublin than the other works of James Joyce, because we have a copier Taipei people in Taiwan and very popular.
所以我在译者序里面，我也拿台北人来说明这本说明的 Dubliners。
So to echo that, I did in my preface reference Taipei people as an inspiration.
Excellent. Okay, we are just about out of time, but I want to just make sure no one's desperately trying to ask a question that I didn't see. Anybody? Okay, well, in that case, it leaves me to thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.